This was the case in which our audience may remember they refused to release the manifesto. They said it would be too disturbing, it would be too dangerous. And then about a year plus ago, Steven Crowder got his hands on at least a piece of the manifesto and released it. And this woman had all these bizarre trans fantasies involving having male sex, like she would be the male with her stuffed animals, and how if she would just go up to heaven after committing all these murders, she was sure God would put her in a boy body. Completely whitewashed. Like the media did not want to, the cops, nobody wanted to talk about the trans element of this woman's craziness.
What is being called the final report has been released. The Nashville Trans Shooter, the school shooting that took place that took the lives of 6 individuals. The entire situation has been controversial on many fronts. One, because of the inordinate amount of violent encounters that have taken place involving trans shooters, trans attackers, and the overall media and FBI and local police jurisdiction cover-up of this entire event. But make sure you stick around and watch this whole thing as we do a pretty deep dive and we seek to unpack it. Later on in this video, I'll share some content involving Megyn Kelly and Michael Knowles as they dive a little bit deeper than you'll typically hear from the mainstream media. Check it out.
As we've gotten an update on a very sad story, but one that we brought to you here on Live Now from Fox. There's been an update there in the report of the Nashville shooter saying that they spent several years planning this attack. So what we're talking about here is the Nashville police have finally released their final report on the Covenant School massacre. This was a targeted March 2023 attack on a Christian school by a transgender shooter who killed 3 third graders and 3 adults as well. I want to put this up on your screen there from the New York Post.
I could recall directly how there were many on the progressive left who were almost making this the shooter out, Audrey Hale, out to be the victim, and not even wanting to acknowledge the reality that Christians were intentionally targeted during this event. Kids were intentionally targeted. It was like they didn't want to even acknowledge that, or even the possibility that her condition, her gender dysphoria, could have played a role. Maybe the medication she was on. I think she was dealing with clearly she was dealing with some psychiatric problems, but maybe some deep levels of depression and various other psychosis, psychiatric illnesses she was dealing with. How they didn't really even want to deal with the reality of her situation that could have potentially driven her to murder these 6 people.
This is what we now know, that rather than a highly anticipated manifesto, that report found that the killer, Audrey Hale, left behind numerous notebooks, art books, and computer documents about her plans to commit the attack and gain notoriety, partly inspired by the Columbine shooting back in 1999. Again, we heard from some of those officials earlier today. Let's listen in to that press conference.
Evelyn Dickhouse, age 9. William Kinney, age 9. Hallie Scruggs, age 9. Mike Hill, age 60. Catherine Kuntz, age 60. And Cindy Peak, age 61. May God bless all these families. Thank you.
I just want to say again how grateful all of the council who have had a chance to work with these families are to be able to work with them for these past 2 years. I can certainly say on behalf of all council that this has been a challenging thing for us because we have seen firsthand through our interactions with all of them just how devastating these losses of life were and the aftermath that came from the conspiracy theories and some of these political agendas that have followed while we've just tried to have these families be left alone and left in peace. My hope is that after you review this report, you will see that all of the conspiracy theories are false. There is no there to this report. The police report is very detailed. It is chock full of information. I hope it will answer whatever questions you have.
Well, let me just say this one thing. Now, I don't know exactly what he's talking about. I'm learning as we go. But the mere fact that they withheld this information this thing happened 2 years ago, and we're just now starting to get more information. What else are people to start believing? What else are people to think when they want to assume that there's a conspiracy theory? Had this been a white man who went into a predominantly black neighborhood or predominantly black school and started shooting up the place and had written out his plans of attack over the course of months or years, you don't think that information wouldn't have come out immediately? Man, our heads would have been spinning. People would have still been in deep mourning or in shock over the incident before more details would have been revealed. So when there is a willful effort to keep or withhold information, that already shows me that there's some level of conspiracy. And I don't know what his mindset is, what he's going to say, but to act as if people don't have any legitimate concern as to why it took so long for the details to come out. And if I recall correctly, over a year ago, there was a local reporter who was able to get a few details, maybe a few pages of a manifesto or something along those lines, and he released it, and he was in all kinds of trouble. So I'm sorry, but spare me with this whole talk of there's no conspiracy. Clearly there was, and the conspiracy was to suppress a lot of this information from coming out.
But in particular, we hope that now that this has been released, everyone will be satisfied that they have the information they need so that these families can be left alone to their private affairs.
And let me just say this one thing. If we come to find out that, because there has been a lot of talk about, and I said this earlier on, there's been a lot of discussions about the medications that they give people who are seeking to transition and the impact it could have on their hormones, the impact it could have on their overall health, not to mention their mental health. Because there is such a thing as roid rage, and there is a danger of, if you take too much growth hormones, too much testosterone, things like that, that it can have an impact on someone's natural levels of aggression. So, and we're not even talking about the whole host of other drugs that are needed to get this whole process going. So it's not irrational to think or to wonder or ask the question of whether these procedures could have led or could have played a role in her violent actions. And people could be wondering that for various reasons. And it's not always some big old political agenda. Some people are legitimately concerned on both ends of the political spectrum. It's just that now you can't talk about that. You can't ask that question when it comes to certain protected groups. And they're basically overlooking the long-term potential harm that it might have on the lives of many people, young and old.
And the cycle of violence can stop. Again, we thank you very much for your time. And with this, we'll go on background and answer questions as we can.
Eric, I have a question for you. I'm Lauren Howard from WSMP. Do you guys have any knowledge that this was coming out this morning, or was it a surprise?
I said I would answer that on background, so I'll do that after we stop. Thank you.
All right, that was just the first portion of that press conference. We're going to jump back into it in just a second here as we hear from some of the victims' families. But we do know that Audrey Hill was identified as that shooter, the 28-year-old. And the police say that they began fantasizing and researching mass shootings. As
you hear, she called herself, she went to say she, and then she paused. I'm telling you, these people are this whole agenda. She was probably worried that she's going to say the wrong thing and offend somebody or hurt someone's feelings, or she was told that by her producers and whatnot. But this is a woman, regardless of what you say, regardless of how you feel. Audrey Hale was a woman, and let's call things for what they are. Let's call true things true.
As far back as 2017. In fact, investigators say that they began writing detailed fantasies, identified as that shooter, the 28-year-old. And they say, the police say that they began fantasizing and researching mass shootings as far back as 2017. In fact, investigators say that they began writing detailed fantasies about the shooting.
Why don't she just say Audrey then? That's all you have to say. Refer to her by her name. If you don't want to say she, just refer to her by her name. It's so silly.
Leading up to it as well, and also wanted to target another school, the middle school that they attended, before deciding then to turn their attention to Covenant. So we'll listen back in as some of these families are now making responses as well in the wake of the shooting and responding to how some of those reporter questions in the room. Let's listen.
Hope we can get some audio here.
And our week, I just didn't want it to land on our anniversary week. Last week was extremely difficult, re-traumatizing. Our children are still very much in the trenches of trauma, and it's not linear, the healing process. And our daughter was 9 and in the 3rd grade class that day.
Sure. All of this really is in all of our legal papers, and I would also say in Chancellor Miles's opinion. The simple reality is, and I think it's uncontroverted at this point, that one shooter's writings inspire copycats. And that is what Chancellor Miles relied upon. So when I said earlier that we hope to break the cycle of violence, that's the point, right? Is that we've said all along, we've had people say, oh, the Covenant parents are opposed to transparency. Well, that is completely false, because from day one, we said we wanted this report to come out. So we've been waiting for 2 years for the police to provide transparency, which is what today brings. But you can have transparency without having to publish every last one of the person's writings when you know 2 things. You know that the writings will lead to copycats, which is proven in part because Audrey Hale herself read them, as the police report details. And the second thing is that these writings cause immense harm to the children of the families you see up here, to the surviving children. It's, again, you know, I'm just repeating some of the stuff we said in Chancery Court, but if you think about it from sort of a common sense perspective, you've got a child that's gone through something like this. I mean, if any of us went through something like this, we would be deeply traumatized. But a child's going to try to make sense of it, and so they're going to try to read whatever they can, and reading the writings of the deranged person that attacked them is just terrible for their mental health.
But you also have the reality that there are police reports, people going to be talking about this, which they've done for the last almost 2 years. The public wanted to know, and the more you suppress this information, the more they're going to talk about it, and the more they're going to assume that there's some type of conspiracy going on, whether or not there was one or not. But it seems to think rationally about the whole thing, you would understand why somebody would come to that conclusion. And if you're talking about 9-year-old kids, I don't know too many 9-year-old kids that would want to be reading something like that, honestly. But there's still the investigative part about it. How can we prevent things like this from happening? And acting as if and not sharing the information isn't the way to do it. But yet at the same time, now they're releasing the information. So now it's going to be better. It doesn't make any sense, because if these young kids are still struggling through it, now that they're older, 11 years old or older now, they have a greater capacity to read and understand. but it could be reopening the wound. So using his rationale, they should have never released the information. But that doesn't make any sense. So that's what makes me believe that they had a deeper agenda.
So, I mean, I didn't know about the Antioch bill. My role is limited to representing these families in this case, but I really wish that the legislature here and everywhere would start to say, you know what? We shouldn't release any of these writings from any school shooter anywhere in the country ever again. Because this was the first time anyone ever had a chance to come to court and to prove in court what happens to the survivors of these shootings. There'd never been a case where one had a chance to put on proof. And we put on proof, and none of the petitioners rebutted it at all.
Again, at the same time, it's a good thing to know, for the public to know about this, not just the police and FBI and people like that. The public needs to know, because what if there is a key in those writings that where we can prevent something like that from happening again? I keep saying it over and over again. But this idea that we act as if this didn't happen or we suppress the info from the world, I think is ridiculous. I just don't agree with that at all.
It just stands as unrebutted evidence. So that would be my answer to your question.
And even though, there is a way, I guess in a way, the case is kind of enclosed, but to you as families, is it closed? Is this the end? I kind of explained what you all have to go through. Even though it's like, oh, there's the answer, no lottery, but to the families, is it really like the end of the case?
This will be the last question, by the way. So does anyone else want to? Not to take away.
No.
Okay, so anyone else? Yeah.
I mean, for me, no. This isn't something that just starts and ends in a legal process. We're talking about, the future impact and just the, how our children, how our families now operate on a daily basis. They're going to get older, use technology. They're going to be seeing this type of behavior. Hopefully we can stop it with how we're approaching this and not wanting to release documents like this in the future. But they're going to be exposed to just all kinds of horrible things for the rest of their lives. And if we can prevent some of that, I mean, it is worth all the time in the world.
I hear what the parents are saying, and I respect that, but I just think that they are overwhelmingly wrong, because there weren't a ton of shooters before Columbine. It wasn't a common thing. There were active shootings that did take place. We have to have a solid understanding of the nature of man, and there is a sinful nature that we all have, and that can manifest itself in various ways. It could someone could just be wrestling with anger issues, or somebody could have a level of darkness to where they can go and shoot up a school. And there could be other factors in that. I think they've been convinced that that's the best way to go. But I'm pretty sure that most parents, or there are many people in that school who want more details, and they just may be in the minority. Let me know what your thoughts are. And while you're doing that, or after you do that, make sure you stick around to see the next portion of this video where we do a little bit of a deeper dive. Now here, Megyn Kelly and Michael Knowles from the Daily Wire go into a bit more detail about this whole situation.
Not totally dissimilar from what happened with the Nashville shooter, that woman who went into a lower school and killed 6 people at the Covenant School in Nashville, March 27th, 2023. We don't say the name of the mass shooters here, but it was a woman who was having gender dysphoria and was trying to become a male, or wanted people to think of her as a male. And this was the case in which our audience may remember they refused to release the manifesto. They said it would be too disturbing, it would be too dangerous. And then about a year plus ago, Steven Crowder got his hands on at least a piece of the manifesto and released it. And this woman had all these bizarre trans fantasies involving having male sex, like she would be the male with her stuffed animals, and how if she would just go up to heaven after committing all these murders, she was sure God would put her in a boy body. Completely whitewashed. Like the media did not want to, the cops, nobody wanted to talk about the trans element of this woman's craziness, of her insanity.
Exactly what I'm talking about. At no point was that mentioned. And you mean to tell me that that didn't play a role? That was a complete non-factor? Stop.
And now they finally concluded their investigation on this Covenant school killer. And they release a 48-page report, which does not include the word trans. It does not include the word trans. It has other passing references to some gender issues, but it's completely downplayed. It's like it was, basically not relevant to it. This is a little bit of the reporting. Despite needing more than 2 years to complete its investigation, the police department confirmed that this person acted alone, and during the attack itself, no one around the killer had knowledge that she was planning the attack, although her parents knew she had thoughts about killing her father. They found that her parents, her mental health providers, and the firearm retailers who sold her the weapons bore no responsibility and had no prior knowledge of her plans. And now they state in this conclusion that she didn't leave behind a manifesto, Michael, because it wasn't laid out in one single document. There's all sorts of justification for this. Listen to this. They write, early in the investigation, it was suggested that this...
No manifesto, but yet you have a series of notebooks detailing your plan, but no conspiracy theory.
Shooter left behind a manifesto detailing her motives and intentions. By definition, a manifesto is a mission statement or other document written and disseminated by an individual or group to enumerate or expound upon the guiding principles and beliefs that inform their actions. Regardless of length, a manifesto is a single document that outlines all the factors, intentions, and objectives of an individual act or a series of actions. In this case, a manifesto did not exist. The shooter never left behind a single document explaining why she committed the act, why she specifically targeted the Covenant, and what she hoped to gain, if anything, with the attack. Really? Now they've been saying for 2 years that it would be too dangerous. They didn't think we could handle it. It's too disturbing. Now suddenly it's, it didn't exist because it was in the form of multiple documents and not just one. I feel like we're looking at parallel stories in a way here, where the shooter, the killer, is in a protected group about whom you are not allowed to say certain things or ask certain questions.
100%. I'm really hoping that maybe the FBI will get their hands on this thing and they'll release more data, because this is garbage. Or maybe they'll do an actual investigation. But knowing these folks, they probably destroyed half of this stuff. Sickening.
The excuse might as well be that manifestos are always saved as PDF files. And this was a docx, so not a manifesto, not going to release it. It's so flimsy. It contradicts what they've been saying for years at this point. But of course, they were going to ignore the central feature here. We've been talking about red flags. We've been talking about the ideological and cultural insistence that we not acknowledge what's before our own eyes. So in this case, you want to know what a red flag might be? That you have a person who is as mentally ill as it is possible to be, a person who doesn't understand some of the most basic aspects of her own identity. I would like to know that as the parent of someone who is at a school. I would like to know if there are really crazy people, people who not only have a flawed perception of reality, but who are part of a group that is singularly violent and committing violence not only against others, but notably at unmatched rates against themselves.
Right.
A group of people that has a real problem that a caring society would try to fix.
Yeah, and he's referencing the suicide rate amongst the trans community and how it is overwhelmingly higher than your average, everyday, normal citizen. And so we just ignore that factor. I guess that's what these people want us to do.
Remedy rather than affirm and make worse. That's the sort of thing that I would like. But that has to be ignored because the culture tells us that we have to exalt falsehood and we have to deny truth. So then when one of these people flies off the handle, we all have to act surprised. I have been going out and speaking in public for, I don't know, 10 years or something now as part of my show and part of my public life. I've been attacked precisely on 2 occasions physically. Both times it was because I discussed the question of transgenderism. One time was right at the beginning of my speaking. The other time was a couple years ago. Some Antifa guy was so furious at my observation that transgenderism isn't real that he tried to blow me up when I was giving a speech, and he seriously injured a female police officer. I've talked about a lot of other issues, and it's not just me. There are many people on the right for whom this is the case. The minute you question the trans ideology, these people who are so obviously and notably insane will fly off the handle.
Yep, but again, we're supposed to act as if that isn't true. We're supposed to completely overlook that, completely ignore that. When I talk about left-wing violence in comparison to right-wing violence, it's not even close. It's just that the left-wing violence goes against the mainstream media's agenda. So oftentimes it's overlooked or downplayed. Fiery, but mostly peaceful during 2020. Does that ring a bell? But January 6th is the worst incident that we've ever seen in the history of humanity, as some would want us to believe.
Can we say that? I'll probably be censored from social media for acknowledging that right now. But let me just ask the people who insist
we're literally
that we not
talking about
reality.
a so-called trans person who killed 3 6-year-olds and 3 adults. It's absolutely factual in the case that we are discussing at this moment. Please keep going.
Without question. My question to them, by the way, who say that we need to lie to people in order to mollify them, that lies will set you free and the truth is cruel, a complete inversion of what we've known in our civilization for thousands of years. My question to them is, who does that serve? Is the trans identifying girl who shot up the school and then was happily killed by a police officer, is she better off because of that? How about this kid, the perpetrator just yesterday, who murders a 17-year-old promising kid because he flies off the handle? Is he served well by just ignoring red flags? And that guy's life is over as well, and he's got to live with the grievous sin of having taken another life. Who benefits from living in a society full of lies? Nobody does. I mean, it's a total Faustian bargain,
The liar benefits, and those who support them in their lies. Because if you can keep this stuff hidden, and this is why I believe this, a lot of this movement, a lot of these movements, in particularly this trans movement, is just, and I think Michael Knowles is nailing it, is based on a foundation of lies, and it's demonic at its heart. Because they deny true realities, or when confronted with them, they typically want to blame shift or change the topic and not address or confront the reality that harms have been caused by being advocating for these surgeries and these procedures and acting as if there's no negative repercussions at all. And you get stuff like this when you do that.
Give up the truth, live in lies, and then at least some people will be happy. And the conclusion of it is none of us are happy, and the whole society is degraded.
Just before we leave this subject, here's just a couple of statements that Steven Crowder reported on when he broke this story last year that did not wind up in the police report. That this shooter had written, "Can't believe I'm doing this, but I'm ready. I hope my victims aren't." Quote, "Kill those kids." Quote, "Going to fancy private schools with those fancy khakis and sports backpacks with their daddy's Mustangs and convertibles." Quote, "Want to kill all you little crackers, bunch of little faggots with your white privileges." Now, I'm sorry, but there is absolutely no reason why the final report should not include those statements. Here's more. The Tennessee Star reported on some of what was found in the manifesto documents, but not in the police report. The shooter wrote extensively about gender identity, her gender identity, including a 3-page entry the killer titled "My Imaginary Penis," in which she wrote about expressing sexual fantasies with stuffed animals. I can pretend to be them and do the things boys do and experience my boy self. God, I'm such a pervert. I waste too much time in my fantasies. The shooter wrote a political rant in an entry dated 1 month prior in which she complained the U.S. fails to respect the rights of disabled people, gun owners, and transgender people. So now because of you, I wish death on myself because of the pure hatred of my female gender. Quote, if God won't give me a boy body in heaven, then Jesus is a faggot. Forgive me for these words. I can't be happy. I'm meant to die. How does this not wind up in the like? We cannot have the realities of these people who wind up committing individual murders or mass murders whitewashed for some sake of being sensitive to their particular. And by the way, one of the things that we also learn about the shooter that's not shocking is she was on the autism spectrum. And the reason I say it's not that people on the spectrum murder, it's that a lot of kids on the spectrum go down the gender rabbit hole. They tend to have the patience for a 3-hour session on Reddit. You know, they can have obsessive thinking. And so they're particularly vulnerable to these online social media traps that are laid for kids who are not trans to start believing that they are. It's really no surprise to those of us who, you know, cover these stories a lot.
Everything that she was just spewing, this young lady, the shooter, everything that she was talking about, that doesn't just come out of thin air. That is taught. People are indoctrinated. And I have to say it again. Imagine if this was a extremely far right individual who hated anyone who was un-American or non-white, and they had all this written down in multiple folders. This would have been a never-ending news story. I want y'all to at least acknowledge that. If you don't agree with me, at least acknowledge that reality. That if this was somebody who isn't a part of one of the many protected classes, this story would have been everywhere. But it wasn't. And just ask yourself why. Is it because they want to protect the victim? Or could there also, and that could be a part of it. I'm willing to even acknowledge that. But I would argue that there's a far bigger picture than that. They want to protect this entire transitioning gender ideology agenda. That's the goal. So they can spread this foolishness onto more unsuspecting young people.
That this young woman had some sort of autism spectrum disorder and wound up getting sucked into this cult. It happens time and time again. Another thing you're not allowed to say. Another thing we may get censored for. It's just sick and tired of it, Michael. I know you are too. I've seen you get attacked. I mean, I've seen what's happened to you, and you were on the early edge of this. You know, I'm really sick and tired of it. I care. I'm going to be honest. I care more about the life of the innocent kid who, Metcalf, who got killed than I do about these kids who have murder on their minds. I also care about them, but I just have to say, like, I'm not so sensitive that I can't discuss what really led to the murders. Right. I'm really thinking more about preventing the next murder.
Clearly, these folks they're not worried about that. They're more concerned again with the agenda. But let me know what your thoughts are. Comment down below. I'd love to hear what you have to think, because this topic right here, we can go on and on with the videos and discussions on this issue. This is one of the primary issues of the day. Let me know what your thoughts are. Comment down below. If you appreciate content like this, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. Before you go, check out this video right here where we dive a bit deeper into this entire topic.